After a few hours, someone went to the entrance of an S-level cave, which was filled with bones of mutant beasts. This person was none other than General Lu Sheng, who carried a backpack on his back. He approached the entrance, put his foot on the rock and began to look inside. The last time he had entered it was at night, but this time it was daytime and the feeling was a bit better. There was less taste of creepy terror. With a serious look, he thought that any monster or mutant beast was just an illusion in front of him. While he was deep in his thoughts, a voice began to sound in his head saying that a single blow could destroy everything. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng couldn't help but feel somewhat perplexed and with a confused look started to wonder what was happening. Without hesitating for a second, he took a leap and decided to enter the cave. He didn't know if that consciousness in the depths of that cave was still going to be there, nor did he know if it only existed in that double-a-level cave or was present in every cave. His body began to emit a powerful green energy. He extended his hands to the sides and started descending more quickly. It's not that he wasn't afraid. Last time he had tested it and knew that the consciousness was just a paper tiger. Although he was stronger than Lu Sheng, he couldn't do anything from the other side of the rift. He started to look down and began to question why he was using tricks to attract him. Several seconds later, Lu Sheng reached the bottom of the cave. He started to bring his foot closer to the ground and the powerful energy that was around his body began to destroy the ground into pieces. He brought his hand to his face and began to observe the inside of the cave and couldn't help but start smiling. If he met him, he decided it was better to withdraw as soon as possible. After thinking about this, he started wondering what Snowy was doing. At the same time in the cave where Snowy, Dong Shengyi, and Lin Wanwan were, a mutant beast appeared, but he drew his sword, adopted an offensive stance and effortlessly cut the beast's body in half. Lin Wanwan, who was behind him, started jumping for joy while on the other side. Snowy, who had her arms crossed, remained silent. Several seconds later, the corpse of the mutant beast fell to the ground, creating a curtain of smoke. Dong Shengyi moved the sword to one side, started looking forward and with a serene look thought that this should be enough. Lin Wanwan brought her fists close to her face, closed her eyes and started smiling. Snowy began staring at Dong Shengyi and remained silent. Then, she used the technique called Spirit and Arrow, causing her eyes to start emitting a purple-colored energy. Thanks to this technique, she began to scan the entire area. Now that there were no mutant beasts around, she told them they could now collect samples with ease. Lin Wanwan left the backpack on the ground. She put on a mask, approached the beast's corpse to collect a sample, and while putting on gloves, decided to get down to work. She took out a syringe, injected it into the beast's corpse and began to extract its blood, which was green and seemed like acid. Despite the beast being dead, its corpse still emitted an evil energy. After extracting the blood, she put it in a test tube, and while holding the tube with one hand, she started to touch it with the other. Began to observe the blood and thought that this blood sample had a very high intensity. She expected no less from a level 7 mutant beast. Dong Shengyi approached Snowy, began to look at her with a cheerful gaze and with a smile explained that the source of power for a martial artist was their body. Every part of the body was the best weapon. She started to look forward and with an indifferent gaze began to ignore her brother. He grabbed the sword with both hands, put it behind his back, closed his eyes and explained to her that unlike those useless stellar generals, he practiced with melee weapons to achieve a more extreme skill and break the limits of physical performance. After saying this, he opened his eyes and with a smug look told her that if it weren't to accelerate the speed of advancement and improvement, he wouldn't even be using a sword against the beast since after all their blood was too dirty. With a calm look, Snowy asked him to shut up or help collect samples, since no one liked listening to his arrogant speeches. Upon hearing this, the conceited Dong Shengyi began to sweat. Then he turned his head towards her and with a confused look decided to stay quiet and help collect more samples. They started to advance through the cave, and along the way several mutant beasts appeared. But Dong Shengyi, who was going first, began to kill the mutant beasts effortlessly using the sword, and thanks to this they reached deep into the cave without any problems. Once they reached deep into the cave, more mutant beasts appeared and began to surround them, and Dong Shengyi started fighting against them. Snowy, who was not far away, began to observe this and remained silent. In theory, she should be happy to have a brother with so much power, but thinking that Lu Sheng could be affected by him, she couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. Several mutant beasts pounced on Dong Shengyi, but just before they could attack, he started moving at great speed and using the sword, cut their bodies in half. Snowy started to stare at him intently and with a determined look thought that it was better for this guy to receive some injuries in the cave. At that moment, a crack appeared near Dong Shengyi. Noticing this, he began to look at it with a confused look and couldn't help but be left open-mouthed and go on alert at the same time. He turned to the side, and with a serious look he asked Snowy why she had not warned him that there was a crack here, adding that if it were not for his martial awareness, he could have ended up badly. Snowy remained calm. She crossed her arms and with a serene look apologized to him, explaining that she had not seen the crack. After saying this, she started staring at him and with a terrifying look asked him not to worry too much since this was a very small crack. Even if he collided with it, he wouldn't die. At most, he would only receive serious injuries. Upon hearing this, Dong Shengyi's expression changed drastically. He couldn't help but be shocked and start sweating like crazy. Immediately, he changed his expression, turned his back to them, and with a serious look told them that this was incomprehensible. Snowy and Lin Wanwan, who were behind him, started to look at him with a confused look and couldn't help but feel somewhat perplexed. Later, they began to advance through the cave. Along the way, more mutant beasts appeared, but Dong Shengyi started fighting against them. While he was fighting, another rift appeared, but he managed to avoid it just in time. Some time later, another rift appeared which almost pierced his chest, but he also managed to dodge it at the last second. He forcefully nailed the sword into the body of a mutant beast using both hands, and at that moment, another crack appeared near his face. Seeing this, he couldn't help but become enraged. While he had one eye closed, he started to look at Snowy with the other and asked her what she was doing. He began to move away from the crack, started staring intently at her, and it didn't take long for him to realize that she wanted to kill him. Snowy, who had her arms crossed, started to smile and apologized with the excuse that she hadn't seen the crack. Dong Shengyi began to point to one side with his hand, and with an angry look told her that she was lying since she had clearly tried to make him crash into it. And besides, it had been her who insisted he go through this area. Snowy turned her head towards him, and with a calm voice she apologized again with the excuse that she really hadn't seen the crack. She promised him not to worry as she would pay more attention next time. Dong Shengyi couldn't help but panic and start sweating in fear. With a look full of fear, he thought that she was very bad and she wasn't even married yet. He put one hand on his waist, started pointing at Snowy with the other, and with a smile told her that little by little the truth was coming to light. She hadn't even gotten married yet and was already starting to betray her own family. She dared to put her own brother in danger, so no one knew what would happen in the future. Upon hearing this, Lin Wanwan couldn't help but feel somewhat surprised and shocked, while on the other side, Snowy turned her back on him and with a lost look remained silently thinking. Upon seeing that she was not paying any attention to him, Dong Shengyi couldn't help but clench his teeth tightly and start getting angry. Lin Wanwan approached him, began to look at him with a worried look and asked him to calm down. He put both hands into his pants pockets, turned his head towards her and advised her not to follow Snowy's example when she went out with someone, as she was a woman who now had a black heart. Upon hearing this, Lin Wanwan was even more surprised. Snowy began to sweat, and she was left speechless. After this, they reached level 34 of the cave, where more beasts appeared as always, but Dong Shengyi using the sword cut their bodies into pieces. At that moment, another crack appeared near him. He started to look at it and couldn't help but stay in shock upon seeing another crack. Luckily, he noticed in time, moved to the side and avoided crashing into it, although in the process he brushed a bit against it, tearing part of his clothes. He started staring at Snowy and told her that it was time to stop joking around, because if he got hurt, none of the three would be able to get out of here, adding that there were level 8 mutant beasts here. Snowy started looking at him, and although she initially remained silent, she then looked away, and with a serious voice apologized again with the excuse that she hadn't seen the crack. Dong Shengyi went into shock and started sweating like crazy. He couldn't believe that this was really happening, while a drop of sweat was falling from her cheek. With a serene look she explained to him that this time she really hadn't seen the crack. She approached another crack, put her hands on her knees, bent down a bit, started observing the crack and revealed that it had appeared suddenly. Before, it did not exist in this space. According to her, this was a bit problematic. Upon knowing this, Dong Shengyi started looking at her and was terrified. Lin Wanwan put her hands over her mouth and she couldn't help but remain in shock. Snowy stood up, and while she had one hand on her waist, she turned to them and with a confused look asked why they were looking at her that way. Lin Wanwan removed her hands from her mouth and seeing that she just said that this time she really hadn't seen the crack, with a shocking look realized that before she had pretended not to see the cracks on purpose. Dong Shengyi brought his hands to his face, started looking up, and while his body was trembling, he panicked knowing that she wanted him to hurt himself on purpose. Snowy turned to the side, and while she was starting to blush, asked him not to talk nonsense since the situation wasn't serious, adding that the continuous appearance of new cracks in the cave generally indicated that it was about to break. More cracks appeared near them. She turned back, started to look at them with a serious look, and decided that the best thing was for them to leave here as soon as possible. It was no longer possible to play with an uprising in a double S-class cave. Although at first they remained silent, Lin Wanwan approached her, and with a sincere look explained that she still had some samples left to collect. Dong Shengyi decided to ignore her since now he couldn't believe a word of what she was saying, and asked Lin Wanwan not to worry as they were going to continue. Snowy started looking at him and remained silent, as all this was her fault. At the same time, Lu Sheng reached level 35 of the S-class cave. A mutant beast appeared behind him, but he gave it a strong punch, massacring it. Then he put his hand near his mouth and started yawning out of boredom. Behind him was a mountain of mutant beast corpses. He approached the corpses, and while having one hand on his waist, he began to extract the liquid using the tube. After seeing the Tiger Scorpion team do this so many times, for him this seemed quite simple. At that moment, he noticed something and his expression changed drastically. He couldn't help but stay in shock. He closed his eyes, put his hand over his nose, and started to have a very strange feeling. His immortal cells were receiving strange signals. He opened his eyes and with a serene look began to decipher what these signals meant. Several seconds later, he deciphered the messages and was in shock upon realizing that he himself or some important people around him were in danger. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.